So let's get into Giants. Let's get into your world. I want to begin with this. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing so much about our lives. How did that era change the way that you create and live today?
I mean, for me, I was fortunate enough. Well, I don't know how much background you have on me, but I had been a professor of music at University of North Florida for 30 years. I just retired just like a month ago. Um, but I also started a website called Barry Greene Video Lessons, and it was in 2007. So when COVID hit, actually, it was a boom period for me because the online thing, as you know, like look at us now, everybody uses Zoom so easily, but all that stuff was so brand new to most people. But for myself, I had already had so much background and a thriving website already that as far as a creator, as far as an educator part of it in my life, um, that again was a boom, a big moment of growth. But it's like everybody else, like the gigs just completely disappeared. It was quite a frustrating time too, and it really hurt me to see like my peers really struggling and trying to piecemeal something together just to try to survive. Like I said, just coincidentally, I happened to be in a good spot when that hit. But man, I remember being in the middle of teaching at UNF and doing Zoom lessons for the first time with students, nobody having any idea how to handle this, and these young people, I'm a 64-year-old man now. I mean, these young guys, it really, I could see it was affecting them at a deep level to the point where I think it affected enrollment across the board, like in universities across the country, where people just didn't see the value of it any longer, where it was just such a challenge in a situation like that, where the whole live music industry almost folded like overnight. So, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that there would be a lot of people that would just kind of stop going to school or not get into the business because jazz isn't a business that you get into because it's going to be lucrative. So I figured with that struggle, is it going to be worth it for them? But it seems like everybody's come back full force and everything's really kind of back to, full strength.
Yeah, I mean, listen, obviously after all these years, I have a lot of friends in this world, and I wouldn't say it's full strength, but definitely is, yeah, it's certainly bounced back. But I mean, on a personal note, I definitely felt it that after COVID, really never got my studio numbers back to where, and for me, we were a small program, so I would have like about 5 or 6 guitarists, all at a very high level. The audition process was very thorough, and we really wanted strong students. But it was hard to even maintain that as after COVID. Like I said, I remember looking in kids' eyes, I could just see it, their wheels turning like, what am I doing? Sitting in front of my camera trying to get a guitar lesson, so but anyway, yeah. The things are definitely back. I
Yeah.
just don't think they're as good as they used to be. At
Yeah.
least the people I've spoken to.
No, I agree. Absolutely. So let's get into Giants. I love this album. I profiled on the show. Ulysses Owens Jr., you got Pat Bianchi, you got Steve Null. There's so many people that are on this album. Talk to me about how you orchestrated and got the vision to become reality.
Well, a lot of this goes to Ulysses. He produced the record, and he and I have been friends for a long time. And I'm sure you know about him. He's just seems to be doing everything at one time. I'm really impressed by him as a human being. He's just, one of the nicest people I know. But Pat, I've played with. We did a thing for a tribute to Pat Martino. I think it was about 3 years ago now,
Yeah.
4 years ago in New Jersey, and a bunch of us like myself and Rodney Jones and Jonathan Kreisberg, a whole bunch of people like that. We all did a tribute to Pat Martino, and Pat. That's where I first met Pat. Dave Kokoski, I've known for almost my entire life. We went to the Berklee College of Music together in 1979 is where I met him. And even back then, we were just 18-year-old kids, Back then, I remember, faculty asking Dave if he would do gigs with the teachers. It was just unbelievable. And I was fortunate enough to be friends or roommates with Dave Kokoski's best friend. So just by happenstance, I got to hang around with these guys. And man, I mean, I learned more from him in that 2 year period that I was at Berklee than any other person or schooling in my life. So when this came around, I thought, man, what a full circle moment it would be if I can get Dave. Because we used to play when we back in the 80s, I was living in Jersey, and I think he was too. I think he still lives in Jersey. We were doing gigs in New York all the time. And a lot of times I'd be sitting there thinking, what on earth is Dave calling me for? I mean, he seemed like light years away. So when we did this record, we had one night at Smalls in New York, and Dave was on the gig, and we just, how that is when you haven't seen somebody in a million years. You just seemed like it was just yesterday. Just
Yeah.
felt so comfortable. But I said that like on the microphone. I was telling a story to the audience, about essentially what I'm telling you. And I remember saying to Dave, yeah, man, it's always, I've always thought about why on earth he get. And he just said, Barry, you always had the most beautiful touch. And that really, really moved me, because of all these years of wondering, obviously as the years go on, I'm sure there's probably a lot of artistic endeavors. You have people like Dave who are extraordinary, such a beginning age, but then, how much further can you possibly go? Do you know what I mean? And then as you work, people like myself have to put in a lot of hours. You get closer, and at that night at Smalls was really, really great. And Marco Panacea, I've known forever. I've done tons of gigs with him. I don't know if you're familiar with the bar next door. That's a fatality, by the way, of COVID.
Yeah.
The restaurant's still open, but the bar next door never recovered. Um, and Steve Nelson's the only person I didn't know personally. That was the first time I met him.
Yeah.
But it was Ulysses' vision. He's like, Barry, because I was thinking, let's get a tenor saxophone, because that's what every guitar album is, like with organ trio. And that's Ulysses said, why do what everybody else is doing? Let's do something totally different. Why don't we get Steve Nelson on it? So it was his vision for sure to put Steve on there.
What are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
I mean, like we were already kind of discussing, I've devoted my whole life to teaching, and I put a lot of content out of educational stuff, but also of me playing, and I get emails every day. Barry, why don't you do a record? Why don't you do a record? And so I wanted to have something that I think represents me, and in a way that at this stage of my life, if I didn't do anything else, I could feel really, really good about this documentation of this moment, in my life, because I do feel like at this time I'm at my strongest that I've ever been as a musician. So I was, and that's essentially it, just to have a really good documentation of my playing at this stage. So I got tons of feedback from colleagues and friends. Well, of course, it's going to be positive. I was going to call you up and say, "Hey, your record sucks," but you know what I mean. It's been a very positive experience, and yeah, quite honestly, I would love to do another one. But man, hiring musicians of that caliber and
Yeah,
studio time and flights and hotels, it's not the kind of thing you just get up in the morning and decide, let's do a new record. So,
for
but
sure.
anyway, yeah, that's essentially it. I wanted a good documentation of
Yeah.
me at this point as a player.
So take me back to your beginnings. Where were you born and raised? How did music and jazz become your life?
I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was adopted at 3 days old and grew up in North Bergen, New Jersey, which is just a little bit south of the George Washington Bridge. So the location was ideal because, back then, especially before the explosion of population, I used to be able to hop on the George Washington Bridge and be in New York in 15 minutes. I'm like, not exaggerating.
Yeah.
Or the Lincoln Tunnel. This is like in the 80s. And it's so long ago that I remember tossing coins. I don't even know if you know what I'm talking about. Like in a toll booth, there used to be a basket where you would toss coins and then it would clink, 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 and you'd be able to go through. Now it's like $14 or $15 to go over, these bridges and tunnels. So, but back then it was so easy. And yeah, I mean, I was doing a lot of weddings and bar mitzvahs and things like that, making a living being a musician, going to school. I was at William Patterson College for a while when I was in Jersey. And then I just thought, there's probably something better for me. And I moved out. This is a very abridged story, but moved down to Florida, played gigs for a while. I was turning about 30-ish. And I thought, man, should go back to school, get a master's degree. And I did. And the year that I graduated, the position at University of North Florida was available. It all just kind of aligned. And it was one of those moments in life where I felt like, you just hop on this rail, like this train. It's just steamrolled ahead. It seemed like just locked in. You know what I mean? Like you try all these different avenues in life, and then you find that one thing, and bam, it's just like a direct path like to success. So, but the jazz thing was like a lot of people like me who grew up in the 70s. I loved Zeppelin and Aerosmith and all that kind of stuff. But once my guitar teacher let me hear George Benson and Pat Martino, I didn't even believe it was real. I thought it was some sort of like sped up recording, to hear somebody without distortion on their guitar, you know what I mean? Just play so fluidly.
Yeah.
And that caught me. I mean, the technical part of it grabbed me immediately. I thought I want to be able to do that. I just wanted to be able to do that. So, but that's essentially it. But I was in a neighborhood or part of the country that was thriving. There was so many great musicians. And like I said, Dave was one of like hundreds of jazz musicians that, were living and working in New York City. And I know I'm rambling on, but back then it was different too in the way that it was so easy to get to New York, but there were a lot of clubs that like a 20 something year old person who had no money could walk into. Like Bradley's was one of them where I could walk in and I would see oh gosh, I'm thinking of names now. It was basically a piano bar, but Rufus Reed would be playing bass, Tommy Flanagan, all these amazing piano players would just be there. I remember walking to use the bathroom, and I remember making a right turn to go to the bathroom, and there's Tony Bennett sketching, in
Wow.
a corner. It's like such an amazing time, and it was so much easier to deal with the city than it is, right now. But yeah, it was just like an environment that was fertile for jazz. And even though I missed initially the power, when you have a big amplifier behind you and a distorted guitar and long hair, and you feel that testosterone, the what kind of fulfilled or that missing link for me was that aggressive style of like hard bop jazz, where there's a lot of articulation, people like Clifford Brown and Sonny Stitt and Charlie Parker, of course, that kind of thing really attracted me. And from that moment on, I just kind of gravitated toward it. So
Well, it's interesting, being in that fertile playground in a different era of so many historic cats, even with David and all these other people that you've talked about, that had to have been an unbelievable backpack to take into your teaching gig, to give to the younger minds, to be able to unpack all that wisdom and knowledge.
yeah, it was, and I have had that conversation, and sometimes I'll tell these stories because I've got so many after all this of this time, these interactions with people that we are household names, to us, and I feel not bad, but I think to myself, there's not, in Jacksonville, Florida, they don't have access to that kind of energy and that kind of, I wouldn't say it's cutthroat, but a very, very quick story. I remember driving into New York, and there was a place called the Jazz Forum. And you would just get into an elevator, you would go to, I think, one or two floors up, and you'd be in this huge loft space. But it was Philly Joe Jones Jr. ran the jam session. And I walked in there as a cocky kid from New Jersey, ready to take New York City on, and I remember they called Autumn Leaves, which is like a real textbook easy tune that's the tune that people use to start learning how to play jazz. And they called it in a key that I didn't know. And I was so young, I had no idea about people playing tunes in different keys and things like that. And I just completely froze and panicked. I'll never forget this because I was sitting on stage, sitting in a chair. So Philly Joe Jones came up to me standing. So we were eye level. You know what I mean? And he goes, "Man, it's cool. Just lay out, brother. It's totally cool. Lay out." But from a guy going in there like so energized to take the city over, and then I have tears in my eyes driving home, those kind of moments, man. I'm telling you this story now. It's like 50 years later, or whatever it may be. Yeah, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that kind of moment, and that sticks with you. That never happened to me again. I can tell you that. I
Yeah.
realized how important it was to be able to know tunes in all keys and things like that. But those kind of experiences of getting kind of hurt on a gig, you know what I mean? That's the thing that I think that a lot of students miss out on. And it's such a, I'm not getting into any kind of weird, political stance or anything, but we're so coddling, and I really believe that you need to get your ass kicked, essentially, is what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say. Forgive me for the, expletive on
No,
the
you're good. No.
recording, but that was part of that whole scene. There was actual fear, and but you grew so much from those moments. You walk out of a gig recognizing immediately what I need to work on and things like that, versus being in a very safe environment like a university, and you play your scales and you do your combo rehearsal and things like that. When you're there and some of the greatest guitar players in the world are, watching you from the audience or on the bandstand with you, man, you know, but so anyway, I probably got off track a little bit, but
No,
yeah, bringing those stories to students, yes,
yeah. Well, it's interesting. If that symbol didn't get thrown at Bird, we would have never had that, right? I mean,
right,
those are the moments that are
right,
absolutely emblematic of so many things. I mean, even more on another level with Miles being out front, I believe it was Birdland when he got attacked. I mean, his whole life, that sound changed. And a lot of them, even with Dizzy and all those early cats, we may never have had bebop if there weren't those moments. Not that any of that was even condonable. But through the tragedy and through those moments, you know in your career how you got shaped and how it helped you.
right. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think in any endeavor, especially a serious one, you have to. not faced with hardship, but you have to be challenged,
Yeah.
in order to grow and grow and grow and grow.
Yeah.
So that's not to say that, listen, Jacksonville, it sounds like it could be a sleepy town. There is a lot going on. And I will say, in a very proud way, there are a lot of guitar players living here right now who are playing, former students who are playing at a really high level. And so that makes me really, really happy. But there's nothing like the energy of a big city
Yeah.
like New York or Chicago, whatever it may be.
So, what was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away that made you think, man, I want to be up there. I want to do that one day?
And that's a really great question. Like I said, I saw so many people because of living so close to New York. I don't know if I could really answer that truthfully. Like I said, it was so easy just to skip into the city and just. I remember seeing Freddie Hubbard at the Blue Note. I've seen Joe Pass at the Village, just solo guitar at the Village Vanguard. I mean, those are pretty monumental moments. I remember seeing Jim Hall, just a little restaurant gig. You know what I mean? Like the Joe Pass one. I know I'm going off on a tangent because I just love telling the story. But the Joe Pass one, I was probably like 22, and I'll never forget it because it was unbelievable to watch him play solo guitar. Just it was incredible. But I was at the bar, and Joe took a break, and he started walking toward the bar, and just coincidentally, there was a space between me and some other guy, and he kind of wiggled in between us, and just all I could do was stare at the man like in awe. I had nothing. What are you gonna say? Like, what kind of strings do you use? Or, hey, dude, you sound great. Um, but I'll just never forget that little brush with greatness with Joe. But so to answer your question, it's really hard for me to think. I think it would be more like a recordings would be an easier way to say,
Yeah.
like, when I first heard, George Benson playing as a record called Weekend in LA. And it's got a little bit of a popish vibe to it, but the guitar playing on it is extraordinary. And the same thing with Pat Martino on a record called El Hombre. And then my guitar teacher told me, yeah, he's like 22 on this record. I'll never forget it. It's like, what? So, but yeah, again, I had access to so much as far as going to clubs. And even the Vanguard story I just told you with Joe Pass, all that required was like a small door fee. And then you had like you got two drink tickets or something like that. But it was very, very inexpensive to go. Now, I don't know any 20-year-old who can go to like a jazz club now, and they'll have to take out a loan.
Yeah.
So
So, the one thing that's dreamy about what you're talking about with all of these storied cats and all of these venues, especially in New York, when you're dreaming of being a musician, you think about these stages and all of these places, venues. What was the first stage that you set foot on and played on where you were like, wow, this is happening. I'm here.
yeah, I mean, that's another not hard one for me to answer, but it's for me, it's not so much the venues because like dedicating my life to education and being here in Jacksonville, that never really allowed me to play in places like the Blue Note or the Vanguard, things like that, which would be, like you said, otherworldly. But when I found myself on stage with the musicians that I've admired my whole life, that's uh, the best way I could describe what you're asking me. And I've had the privilege of playing with almost every guitar hero, including. I mean, when I'm mentioning Pat Martino, George Benson, this is not some venue at the Hollywood Bowl doing this, but these are smaller moments in my life, getting to play with my actual, heroes. So it's not strange, but I find it interesting that when we would bring in guests like to you at the University of North Florida, and there would be people like we've had Herbie, Kenny Burrell, Pat Metheny, tons of people over all those years. And whenever the guitar players would come and say, "Man, Barry, I've heard so much about you, and I get to play with them all the time." I've got photographs with so many amazing guitarists, including Pat Martino and Jonathan Kreisberg, Jimmy Bruno, Mike Stern, Barry Finnerty. I mean, it's a Russell Malone, and a lot of these people that I ended up becoming really good friends with. So I'm reflecting on my own life. I found it interesting that, I being in the university setting, without even being in New York City, I got to mingle with the people that I would have sought out if I had still been living in New York in the first place. And it's people like Jonathan Kreisberg, for instance. It was probably just last month, he and I were just on the phone talking. And those for me are, even though I'm older, those are still surreal moments for me that we're having this casual conversation just about music and life and stuff like that with the guy I have tremendous amount of respect for. A similar thing with, Pasquale Grasso.
Uh-huh.
guitar player. So he came out to visit UNF, and I was really excited to meet him, obviously. And I walked up to him, and he had a bottle of water in his, I mean, not, a plastic bottle of water in his hand. And it dropped to the floor. And he goes, "Barry Greene, he was like, it was like the opposite. I'm so honored to meet you." Like, what? He goes, "Man, I used to go watch you at the bar next door." But then he, dug into me. He goes, "Yeah, I was like 17 or something," just like a young kid. But it was so flattering. And the whole thing about, like, again, having a growing reputation, being so far from the epicenter of all of it. And when these guys came in, like I said, it's like we had known each other for our entire lives. And Pasquale and I have done these workshops and guitar events together. It's just mind blowing to me because I have so much respect for him and so many others, and the fact that I could just rub elbows like we're best friends.
I
So
love
the
it.
venue part, I know I couldn't answer your question,
No, you
but the
did.
surreal part of it is what I just described.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. So I'm curious, you've been at this for a long time. What do you like the best about waking up every day being a professional musician, being an educator, being in this jazz community? What do you like the best about it?
Well, I mean, I'm in a fortunate place now, where I'm retired, so I have the freedom to do whatever I want. I've been smart, financially, and thankfully that website I mentioned earlier has been successful. So right now I'm just kind of letting that whole feeling of, my career being over at UNF kind of settle in. I'm still kind of coasting right now. Like I typically would be off this time anyway during summer. So it doesn't feel any different. It'll feel weird like when August rolls around and I would normally be getting syllabi together and things like that. Honestly, I'm trying with this record. I should have mentioned that earlier when you asked me what I'm hoping. Part of it too was hoping to get more, gigs. So at this point where I'm completely free to work and to play, I could possibly like, turn that into a kind of a way to help that happen for me. And I've got a couple of things lined up. It's not as easy as I had hoped. I definitely don't envy guys who are on the phone all day trying to line up, gigs and things like that. But at this point, I'm kind of in a not a gray area, but like a holding pattern right now to see what happens. But I've got something nice with Ulysses and Pat Bianchi in a place called the Jazz Corner in Hilton Head. It's a couple of local things here in Jacksonville with, Ulysses again, the Clearwater Jazz Holiday in Clearwater, Florida. But man, I would love to have my calendar, booked up. But anyway, that's a whole other story.
Oh, yeah, no, I get it. So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everyone that you've taught, everyone that you know in a business sense, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I'm starting to feel like almost like the Yoda of jazz education online now. You know what I mean? All these young people are asking me these questions, and they're, real polite and calling me Mr. Green and all that kind of stuff. So I think this advanced, not advanced age, but this age, it seems like I'm in this kind of a, place. I'm primarily known as an educator, and I know that. One of the things I was hoping with that record was not to, there's that, what's that saying, those who, I'm trying to remember, or those who can teach. There's some goofy saying, but essentially saying that if you're a teacher, you can't play. And I wanted to break that mold, completely. So I think that's the way I'm perceived as an old sage, an old wise sage of jazz guitar, with a tremendous history and a long career of teaching. But at the same time, I think people generally, I guess what I'm trying to say is I never take myself too seriously. I realize what I'm doing, is a gift that allowed to my entire life devoted to something that I love. But yeah, I know I'm kind of spiraling answering this question because it's such a personal one. But I feel a sense of satisfaction and just a good not philanthropic, not because I'm not giving money away. But I feel like I'm giving advice, and um, if that is that I can't just explain it any further.
No, that's
That
cool.
was a tough question, man. 'Cause it's very, very
I
personal.
know it is. It's almost the therapy hour, but no, that was great.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Giants is everywhere. It's streaming everywhere. If anybody wants to get an old-fashioned hard copy, is Bandcamp or download, is that the best place or where should they go?
Yeah, I think it's for that everywhere. You know how Origin Records are. I think it's
Okay,
everywhere.
Origin.
Target, it's all over the place.
OA2,
So
yeah. And then if
yeah,
anybody wants to catch you live, anything else going on, where's the best place to go?
like I said, Hilton Head. I'm forgetting the exact dates, but that's coming up in September. The Jazz Corner, Friday and Saturday night. It's a beautiful venue, man. It really, really is. I'm super excited about that
Cool.
that gig.
Right on. Well, I will get all these links in the show notes to make it easy for everybody. Barry, this has been an absolute joy and an honor. Thank you, sir, for taking a minute out today. I really appreciate it.
Joe, it was my pleasure meeting you. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
Neon Jazz.